My name is Lindsay and I grew up in Willard, Missouri. I've lived here my entire life. My little brother, Brian Wallace, he had just finished his freshman year in high school. He wanted to be in the military. Brian was 15, and that night he was going to a dance at the Willard Rec Center. I was at my mom's with Kenzie, and my phone rang, and it was the Willard police telling us that we needed to get up to the Willard Rec Center immediately, that something had happened to Brian. My brother was laying over on the floor. They loaded him up in the ambulance and took him to the hospital. They had to shock him multiple times, and while we stood there and watched his lifeless body jump out of the bed, they finally just said, "We've lost him." When the coroner had called my mom to go over what happened, basically he had said that his heart muscle was already weakened, probably due to a genetic issue. And then whenever the virus hit it, his heart wasn't able to recoup because it was already weakened, and ultimately he had myocarditis. The coroner was like, you probably ought to go get checked out. And my thought is, I'm 23 years old, I'm healthy, I passed 15, so I'm good. What's the chances of both of us having it? Today I'm married to my wonderful husband, Destin, for 6 years.
She's a great mother. She puts the kids first.
My mom is awesome, kissable and huggable.
She basically keeps us family, in one.
We found out we were pregnant in January.
One night she was 3 months pregnant, and I looked over and she started kind of having, like a little seizure. So I went over there to her and said, "Lindsay," and she kind of passed out.
I was diagnosed with dilated cardiomyopathy. Basically, it's where the top of my heart will pump the blood in, but the bottom of my heart doesn't pump it out.
When they diagnosed her with the cardiomyopathy and saying that you have the exact same thing which your brother passed away with, that's when it really set in to me. I was scared. I didn't know, am I going to lose my wife and, the unborn?
What they would typically do is implant a defibrillator pacemaker because of my family history. Although since I was pregnant, I wasn't able to undergo that type of surgery. My heart was starting to deteriorate fast, so they went ahead and decided to induce me when I was 37 weeks.
A brother that passed away was born actually on September 18.
And she was born at 11:58 on September 18th. So the Briley was after him, and her nickname is Bri.
I thought everything was going to be perfectly fine after that.
A week after I delivered my second child, I went into cardiac arrest.
We went to bed that night, and I woke up to her gurgling, trying to gasp for air. Immediately I checked for a pulse. I don't know how I knew to do that. So then I grabbed my phone immediately and called 911. Told them that my wife is unresponsive, so she said you need to clear her airway. So I cleared it, and she said now you need to do CPR. Never in my life I've ever done this. She said you're going to place your hands right in the middle of her chest, and you're going to just start pushing as hard as you can.
It was really terrifying because I didn't know what was going on. I told my sister Briley, "Mommy's gonna be okay, it's okay."
Then the paramedics came and they shocked her 3 or 4 times, and then I could hear them say, "We got a pulse."
So they had taken me to the hospital.
The doctor came out. He said, "If it wasn't for you starting the CPR, she would not be here."
They put me in a medically induced coma because they didn't know how long my heart had stopped.
Whenever she was in that coma, I thought, I may have to take her spot. I just didn't know how I was going to try to be a father to an 8-year-old and then, a week-old baby. She was in there for 3 days, and they started warming her up, and the next morning they called me up and they said she's awake.
Once they took me out of the ICU, it was pretty quick to then put the pacemaker and defibrillator in.
He said, "You're not going to leave this hospital without it."
After getting out of the hospital, I understood that it was going to be a total life change as far as life with a pacemaker now. Watching my sodium, exercising because, I was obviously told that your heart is a muscle just like anything else.
My mom tells me to exercise and to use my heart because if you don't use your heart, you lose it.
Our journey is just beginning. The coroner actually saved some of my brother's heart tissue. It was one of the very first patients he started saving that on. So because of the American Heart Association and the research that they have conducted, we're able to not only test my brother's heart tissue with comparison to mine, but then test to see if my girls have the same trait or have the same gene, that ultimately they could be affected by it.
I'm grateful for the Heart Association. If it wasn't for them, we probably would not have the defibrillator and the pacemaker.
The American Heart Association actually developed CPR, and I'm so grateful for that. And I think it's amazing that they are teaching people all over the country how to do CPR.
You don't know if you're going to have to use it on your wife or your kids or, anybody. So I think it's very important that everybody learn CPR.
The way that I look at my husband is completely different. He is my hero. He saved my life by administering CPR. You never know who's going to be affected by heart disease. I could only tell somebody that if you think it's not going to happen to you, you could be wrong, because that was me. I would have never thought, young, healthy, always on the go, nothing like this would ever happen to me. By supporting the American Heart Association, you never know if you're one day going to be changing or saving your life, your kid's life, your parents' life, or your brother's life. I'm Lindsay Van Zant, and I am a heart disease survivor.